Solari and Mayor.
I've got three things, but I'll try to be quick. First, it was very difficult putting all that together. I think you did a good job with the presentation. Following up, actually, on Mr. Weaver's question, we talked assess land values. Going through this quickly, there seem to be roughly 12 to 15 economic exactions, and I've got no idea what the scale or scope of them is. It seems like the capital costs could increase by either tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, and operating costs by millions or tens of millions of dollars. Before we go forward, I would think we should have some idea of what these costs are. And I know we can't be too specific, but I don't even know what the ballpark is. So that's one. Second, in the county, there's also been a lot of discussion, and I have no idea if it has any basis in fact, but that Fortress, the company behind FEC, is supposedly also owner of a company called 10 Gaming, which is trying to promote casino gambling in Miami. And I've heard that their whole business plan is based on getting casino gambling in Miami, and I think that that is a material fact I'd like to know. The third thing is, you mentioned, I think, laundry list, and this seems to be just too much of everything. I'm wondering if we shouldn't have priorities, and at least based on Indianapolis County, two of the priorities would seem to be just the quiet zone crossings and safe pedestrian crossings. And based on everything I've heard about the bridge crossings, I'd certainly cross that in. So if I have to pick three priorities that we want to focus on instead of a much larger group, those would be the three.
In response to Mr. Solari, Jose Gonzalez is here from FECI, who can address, I would imagine, the corporate structure and relationships that Fortress has. And with respect to prioritization, pardon me, the project is clearly of enormous regional significance. It presents opportunities and it presents challenges, and those are different in different locations. And so this list was an effort to just lay everything out, because there are different priorities among different communities. There are some benefits that come in some places that aren't attributed in others. And so that's for the subject, for the discussion of council, but that was the staff's approach in trying to develop the agenda item, which is, here's everything we've heard from all of these different parties, and it's the council's direction as to how that information should be carried forward.
And I agree with that, and I think that that's what we have to decide. I'll just go over one of those. They reallocate the freight to the CSX rail corridor. My understanding is that freight traffic is the one part of rail traffic that is profitable. So you're asking FEC to give up its profitable portion and put it over to the central corridor and have them have the burden of the passenger portion. I would just guess, on a marginal pricing basis, that would make the whole deal unprofitable for them. It would also give CSX a regional freight monopoly, and monopolies are generally bad. And the third thing it is that if we think that freight rail traffic is a burden on our communities, what we're doing is pushing that burden over to the central Florida communities. So I think in just that one issue, you've got bad economics, bad governance, and immoral action. So these are the type of problems that Again, thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. I've got a few questions if I could. The first is, does Fortress or any related company have any gaming?
Can you speak to the microphone a little bit more?
Does Fortress or any of its related companies have any gaming interests?
Fortress has many different investments. The investment we're under is transportation. We have no gaming interest at all. There's no involvement in that particular side of business at all.
So Fortress has no gaming interest?
Fortress has many investments. They have many investments in various fields. The entity of Fortress is a fund that owns us, so we're under private equity under the big bucket. We're only focused on transportation. What Fortress does across the board, they have various investments. It has nothing to do with us. If it has, it's not, we're not involved in it, period. I answer your question, but I do.
In the financials for the whole Florida project, is gambling in any way a factor in the financial analysis?
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned that all the economic benefits of the project in the area is your financial analysis available which shows those.
It's a private company. We don't have to sort of
Yeah, if it is a private company, but you're asking for an awful lot of government support, let me finish, an awful lot of government support, including a federal loan guarantee, which is a form of subsidy, and the cooperation of a lot of local and state governments, including state corridors, so you broke the nexus. And this is a project which would, more than some other projects, would allow for disclosure of financial analysis because it's a one-off type of project. You're not competing with this type of project with any other organizations. So the general reasons for wanting the financial privileges of a private company aren't really available in this. So again, I mean, I'll be done in a second. Again, you're free, absolutely free, not to disclose. I've got no argument with that at all. But if you want government support and community support for the project, I just offer that as something which ought to be available. And again, I don't think you want to answer the question. I think you want to take that back to your security.
But all of the financial review is done by the FRA through that process. So there is data submitted, and again,
I've seen other government entities do financial analysis, which
we
certainly
have to
satisfy me, but I go back to my constituents. I understand.
there's a process that's why we have to find out as well. But we haven't told that we're not allowed to disclose things, so I'll be happy to take that back and again, to get it. And I have your contact you, right?
Thank you.
Mr. Solari.
Thanks. I want to follow up on what Commissioner Fielding said. I think this is a great forum. I think this is one of the best Coast Regional Planning Council meetings I've attended in 5 years, and I appreciate everything everybody's done to make this happen today. I do want to note, though, that it seems, especially for today's discussion, more than any other, it seems like the beneficiaries of this are all the high population counties, and all the burdens of this are being taken by all the low population counties, and that was one of the problems with, again, the whole 750 process, which we don't want to bring up too much. I think that this project clearly threatens the quality of life of the low population counties. That's what I heard by many, many citizens before I came here today, and it's almost been increased by an order of magnitude today. So I'm not sure that the best path here is to just send a memo articulating our concerns and beginning a negotiation process, which includes so many things that I don't think ought to be here to begin with. So all of that is my one way of saying that I would vote no against this today. I think basically we ought to just say no and begin the process of doing that, which I believe the vast majority of our citizens would like us to do.
Part of it is realizing you have two separate things, I think, in a way. One will be the BIS, which is what the state, obviously the federal government is requiring as we move forward on this. So we want to make sure our comments get into the record on that. And then the second would be you moving forward in that area, because I hate to think that our comments wouldn't get included in.
I think this motion to pass your trial.
Mark's comments. Good morning.
Good afternoon.
We're almost at 20 seconds.
I'm Ann Scott, Commissioner of Martin County, District 3. I think it's ironic that the line that brought life to the Treasure Coast now threatens to kill it. A high-speed train carrying a few thousand passengers a day will go through the middle of a region where hundreds of thousands of people live and work and depend on roads and vehicles to do so. 32 more trains on 350 crossings. Wow, that's a lot of intersections. We don't say this is private. Loans of taxpayer money to a private enterprise to help it salvage a dubious investment is not private. Investment of $250 million of Florida taxpayer money to build an elaborate terminus in Orlando is not private. This has all the markings of digital domain and that wasn't. How will the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council represent the interests of those of us who face massive and unquantifiable burdens and no benefits? I urge you to think about that. And I urge all of us not to accept this as inevitable. It is not inevitable.
First off the bat, we're going to provide, we have several elected officials that fill out cards. We'd like to bring them forward first, realizing they represent the community's head. I have Abby Brennan, Mayor of Village of Cuesta first.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, good Good morning, Council. I first want to thank all of you for the job that you do here, not just on this project, but all that you do for our region. It is very much appreciated. I also have to thank Kim Delaney. You have a staff person here. If you listen to her presentation, I think you have a more global idea of what's really going on. I think she knows sometimes more than all over Florida and FECI because she's looking at all of the regions. So I want to thank her for that. I have her on speed dial now, and I think she's going to put me on her do not call list because I think she's just getting a little bit tired of me. Mayor Malone had talked a little bit about the Loxahatchee River. I'll talk very briefly about that. West's geography is such that it is a peninsula and it is separated by the MC tracks. 85% of our residents are on the west side, as is our public safety building. 95% of our commercial properties and the U.S. one border is on the east. The freight trains are the ones that will probably be increased, from what I understand, are a very serious issue for us. Mr. Gonzalez talked about the bridge being okay with government and Florida DOT. However, 3 weeks ago, which it has done several times, it did not go down. And when it didn't go down, it blocked all 3 exits out to US 1. We had no way of getting out to the east, and it was like that for 2.5 hours. So we have significant concerns about public safety. Also was spoken is if the bridge is down more often than it is up, the Realtors Association will tell you that it can be considered a fixed bridge. Property values, obviously, on the rest of the bridge are going to take a hit if that's the case. I want to speak a little bit more about all of us. I keep seeing references to Henry Flagler. And when Mr. Flagler built this railroad, he came down and the towns were created around it. They have been working together for all those years. I don't know that we can compare what is happening today as Mr. Flagler's dream. We are bisecting our communities. We are going to be putting a lot of these communities separated from each other, and that I don't believe. There is another comment that I hear quite often that this is a game changer. It most certainly is a game changer. And for many of us, most of us, I believe, along this border, it is not a good game changer. It is going to impact our communities in a negative way. So I think the other thing I would just like to ask all of you, it was mentioned, the MPO is working on this. You are working on this. Obviously, all of our towns, communities are working on this. I would like to see if there's a way for us to all get together. Maybe you get a small group of folks from your council to work with MPO. Let's all get together on this. There's a lot of shared issues, but there's also issues that are specific to each other. But I believe to be impactful on FECI and all over Florida, we need to identify the issues that we can all speak together. I think having a unified voice is going to be very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Brennan.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. A lot of you out there are familiar with the village. We're about 2.5 miles in length, just north of the city of Fort Pierce, between US 1 and the Indian River Lagoon. And it's a historic community, a little history lesson. We go back, going way back. This village was the county seat of Brevard County, back when Brevard County included Indian River, St. Louis Department, and I believe like children. We go back to good ways. Our oldest homes precede Henry Flagler Railroad by oldest home by probably 20 years, and our historic sites precede the railroad by 40 years. We've been there quite a long time. We have a National Register Historic District, about a mile long, runs along the riverfront, and the south section of the village with 33 contributing homes and structures in the National Register District. In that 2.5 miles into village, we have 6 crossings. Of those 6 crossings, 4 crossings are the only ones in and out of those neighborhoods. There's 2 crossings that loop around, and the other 4 are running in and out. We've been following this project for some time. We had 2 meetings in Colville, Florida. We thought until 2 weeks ago that we were dealing with a double track and more fast trains to add to the current freight train. But when we did the grade crossing field visits a couple of weeks ago, we found out that there's a triple track almost entirely in the village. It starts just immediately after our southern public crossing and proceeds almost a whole 2.5 miles through the village. We were told that triple track was a center siding that moved freight trains off the track in either direction from the high-speed trains that were passing the outer tracks. So we've been used to the trains, obviously, and the village has been there since the oldest house in 1875. And the historic site was back in 1850. So we've dealt with the railroad. It's been something we're used to. We're not trying to run that or the center side of the village has the potential to seriously impact the ingress and egress out of the neighborhoods. Those trains, we've been told, don't necessarily stop, but they slow to a very slow speed. They're typically 2 miles long. So it has the potential not to block just a crossing or two, but to block every crossing in the village and extend it up the time. We think that has public safety issues. Ambulances, fire in the village. It certainly has issues of delays and people get to and from their homes and their jobs. The other thing that's troubling, I thought, with the triple tracking was the triple tracking resolved to the west of the current tracks. It pushes the western crossing gates out to within 6 or 8 feet of the pavement along Dixon Highway. As it stands now, there's usually room for a car, vehicle or two to pull in off the whole Dixie, wait for trains to cross in front of the crossing gates. Now, in the triple tracking, the way it's designed right now, all the traffic will have to be queued up in the travel lanes, both northbound and southbound along Dixie, waiting for these trains to cross. In the event that there is a 2-mile freight train in the center siding, that could be extended length of time. So we're concerned about the traffic impacts and the hazards always leading to stop sign on Dixie Highway due to triple tracking. In addition to triple tracking, obviously the noise complaints, our crossings aren't that far apart. I think the furthest distance we have between 2 crossings is about 3,500 feet. We looked at and we talked with the FEC and the DOT people about quiet zones of crossings. We understand the basic requirements for quiet zones. Some of those crossings would be almost impossible to construct them just to physically lay out and the narrowness of the roads. It would be difficult to construct at least to the current specifications. Obviously, cost is a big issue. The crossing maintenance is a big part of our budget already. Our budget is about $500,000 a year, give or take. Just this year, we're completing the crossing of Portland Road. The estimate we got was $90,000, so that's a big part of our budget. That's for one crossing. I know when they complete the crossing work, we're probably going to get by for a few years without big costs because they'll be relatively new. We're concerned about the cost down the road. We're very concerned about the safety. A lot of families, a lot of homes, and this corridor backs up right to residential on both sides, on the west side of Old Dixie and on the east side of Old Dixie. So the project has potential to significantly impact us in a negative way, and we haven't seen any solutions yet. But we certainly appreciate the communication, and we appreciate whatever this council.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the Church Coast Regional Plan. It seems like the information on all over Florida is very difficult to find out. It dribbles in from all different parts. And I'm happy that we have an organization that goes out of their way to make sure that everything is looked at and analyzed and it's delivered to the communities. I mean, I didn't mean to give you all an advertisement, but I'm thrilled that our constituents are constantly asking us questions, and the only answers we seem to get is through this organization. I appreciate that. Recently, Fort Pierce staff had met with FEC, FRA, FDOT, AAF on the diagnostic crossings, railroad crossings, and one of the issues that came up that was disconcerting, just to add to the fray, is a third track that's going to be added to a lot of the downtown area to divert freight trains to sit and wait until the transportation trains come through. And a lot of these crossings that are contemplated are in our downtown area. So, I mean, when we start talking about this, we cause frustration for traffic, we cause people taking their own ways to get around these things, either through running crossings or trying to go over bridges or loading up different areas of the community. So this was an interesting part, and I think we identified two of our main crossings that showed that we were going to stage a freight train there for a period of time until the speed train at 115 miles an hour come through the community. So I want to make sure that was part of the impact. I didn't even know if you mentioned that or not. I mean, you speak at 200 words a minute, and I can only hear at 120, so...
Long presentation. So, Commissioner, we have raised that issue in the past. It was raised in the EIS scoping comments that were sent to the FRA in May. If it was not overtly expressed, our apologies as staff, because it's an issue that's been consistently raised, the location of sidings, not just within downtown, but also with respect to bridges. Because if there is a synchronization to take place where a freight train slows while a passenger train is getting queued up to cross, that freight train has to slow somewhere, and that can't be a point of conflict either. There's much longer vehicles to store. So certainly, if it was not expressly raised in the staff report, Council has consistently raised that, and it certainly can be added.
TCRPC.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Brown? Keep trying to make me mayor. You asked us for support, and I can understand that would be very important to us. You described the benefits to the state of Florida, giving us a competitive edge, taking advantage of our mobility options, the higher quality of life. But that's not the question I'm being asked as a commissioner. The question I'm being asked is, what's it going to do for our community? When I asked that question when a representative from all over Florida came to our commission meeting, and I said, what good is it going to be for our community? The gentleman said that as the trains bring these passengers through our community, they'll be able to identify the beauty and the vivaciousness of my community. And I'm thinking to myself at 110 miles an hour, what was that? That was Fort Pierce. Oh. I don't mean to make fun of it, though. That's the questions I'm being asked as a commissioner, is what's the benefit to my community? We know what the impacts are going to be, and those impacts normally are balanced off with some type of benefit. The thought of someday maybe getting a station in Fort Pierce, that's just not good enough for me. I guess I've been in government a little bit too long to buy into that a little bit. But I really would like your thoughts on that. What do I tell the people of Fort Pierce? What do we tell our people of Indian River County or Martin County and all these other outlying areas that are going to be severely impacted by this train? What can we tell them about their community and what benefit this is going to be to them?
So, from our standpoint, there are several benefits that Florida can get. And what happens is, Central Florida, South Florida are all donor counties, donor communities, right? They give more than they actually receive. Because it goes to the state of Florida, then they divvy it up across the state. I don't know if Fort Pierce is a donor community or not, but I'm sure the state of Florida helps with a lot of things. So growing the pool of dollars that go to the state is an important thing for the whole state's economy. When we talk about tourism is not, the point of us connecting these two regions, believe it or not, is actually having people traverse them, identify with them, and then, again, with every system, if I build all the systems that would not be financially viable right now, then that doesn't do, as a company, doesn't do anybody any good, because then I would just fail at it. So if I build a system and I grow it, and then I'm able to expand on it, which is how all rail systems are done. Rail systems, when things like we did it, you grew it to a certain point, and you kept growing it, and as demand happened, and we bought his real estate, it actually ended up having a reason for people to go there. So you've got to get the base system going. It's not, it's not mentioning if I stop in Fort Pierce, or I stop in Beard, or I stop in Stewart, right away, will that be something? I have talked to your staff. Your staff has come to my office, I've come to your office. I've had continued dialogue. We're very serious about that dialogue. We want to make sure, and we actually are studying and looking into how Fort Pierce plays a role. So it's not just lip service, it's actual man time. And we're building real stations in the places where we know we can check today. Our whole rideshare study looks at the whole corridor. If Fort Pierce grew up right there, there'd be a station in Fort Pierce today. incentivize the station to come down. And that's partly because the way that, again, the way that you guys are situated from a tourism perspective, you want to grow more tourism. So I think that's what I heard from your staff, is you want to grow more tourism there, and this is a vehicle for growing that. Now, we're growing it in a way where it's strategic. We're growing tourism where it is today, exploiting the fact that you can now take that stuff and exploit it for tourism, in the sense that you got Central Florida, who's not seeing passengers and tourists from South Florida, and vice versa. People go to Central Florida and don't come to South Florida. Now, if you actually have that interaction between the regions, you actually now cross-pollinate both regions and everything in between. So it's not literally, it's actually a real thing that our studies show, that it has an effect on the whole corridor. So, but it's a process. It's not just here's a station for Pierce, and if you build it, they will come for it. We know they're going to come because they're there today. They're saying we need an additional service. That's why this is making sense. So that's, from our standpoint, it's a process to get there. But the immediate economic impact goes to the state, and the state disperses it down to local communities, because that's how it works today.
Part of the impact, you say if I can grow my tourism in Fort Pierce and show there's a need for a station, we'll put a station there because economically it will make sense. But the impacts that are coming from the high-speed train are against me growing my tourism, because now you've stopped all the movement from the east side to the west side.
How am I stopping the movement? I'm asking that perspective, because the reality is you're thinking that this train is 2 miles long and moving at 110 miles an hour. This train will stop your grade crossing at a light change. That's the longest that east-west traffic will be in whole, is a light change through that grade crossing. So a light change through the grade crossing is just like a normal action of traffic. So it's not like people are backing up and saying, oh, today, Tri-Rail operates 50 trains a day in 90 miles per hour. And Tri-Rail does not have an impact on traffic that you're saying I'm going to have in this grid line. It's not, I'm not telling you what will happen. We will look at it today. And this is the same type of train as Tri-Rail. It's a short train that moves to the intersection quickly.
According to your 30% design plan that we just went through, staff shows that I have a third rail where it's going to divert freight until these high-speed passenger rails, and 2 of my key crossings are going to be affected by this. So, I mean, in that way...
I put this down, and I have to get with the engineering team, because there's no reason, from what I've been working with, unless they're switching. Is this near the downtown where the switching station is today? There's an overpass there, and my understanding is that it will not be blocking any grade crossing. So, I don't know if that's misinformation somebody gave you. We're not diverting freight to stay blocking grade crossings. That is not in any of the plans that we work on. Whoever told you that, I need to find out, because that's not correct information.
Well, I'm just saying,
and that's the problem. There's a lot of information coming out, and a lot of us people speculating, and not. And what I want to do is make sure I give you the realistic information, and that's what the EIS process does. It takes all of this information from various points, puts it in one place, analyzes what's fact from fiction, and it comes out with that binding document, which is the record decision.
well, the problem is I have to support, you're asking me for my support, and I have to be able to talk to intelligent people in my community and tell them what the benefits are going to be. To tell them that we may be getting a station way down the line once we've proven an economic impact to FEC, I don't think it's going to get the job done. And with all the impacts that you are discussing and that we know are going to happen to our community, it's going to have an effect on our government to be able to move people from one side of the track to the next. And that's going to have a dynamic effect for the tourist town that we are and we've become.
I'd love to meet with you. Thank you for having discussion on that. We've been here all day.
Just to remind us, we're not here to get us have an imposition per se, although obviously we have comments and questions for Mr. Gonzalez. Really today, the agenda item that we had is really to transmit comments to the Federal Railroad Administration in advance of the publication of the draft EIS. This is really about that action, and then obviously any comments that we provide relative to this EIS. In fact, that we want to go out.
A number of the North County communities are quite concerned with the fact that there won't be no reduction in freight because we're not going to benefit from the switching. And so it's interesting to learn that there is this freight rationalization study going on in a more global sense. How, and you don't have to tell me now, but is there a contact? How do the local governments and the RTC interject themselves into that study? Because obviously that may offer the only hope that I'm seeing right now for any change in
So the freight rationalization study is an FDOT or Department of Transportation study that's underway now. It is, I think the horizon for that study is probably 18 months for it to be completed. There are initial workshops that have been held over the past few months. Staff has participated in as many of those as we can. The NPOs, the planning organizations, are direct participants as well. And certainly we can forward notices of those workshops and materials to all the council members so that all local governments can be as engaged as they would want to.
Thank you. And then if you could supply a contact person within the agency,
Absolutely.
Thank you. I have Mayor Long and Mayor Taylor.
Thank you. I think one of the greatest frustration that we run into with our citizens is the fact that there's so many unanswered questions, and the answers change daily. And I appreciate the opportunities that we have had to meet with all of North Florida, and are going to continue to do so. But the issue is, again, we have the lots and have in Jupiter and shares the impacts, and they're going to continue to be very vigilant and very concerned. Issues of coordinating train times sound wonderful in theory, and I don't care how much they want to run on time, a minute or two throws everything off. Trying to coordinate passenger train with freight trains is difficult. Certainly, I was quite concerned when I heard the comment that freight trains might be pulled to the side to let the passenger trains cross. The Loxahatchee River the bridge is in very close proximity to two vehicular crossings, and it really limits anything that can happen and ties up major roadways in both of those communities. So it's just a frustrating process. I appreciate everyone that's working to get the FEC to be more forthcoming and to explore those options of reducing the time that the bridge is down, but that continues to be an issue. And to date, we haven't really seen any proof that that's going to change substantially. So that continues to be a major issue. And as we look at the issue of the skilled corridor and appearance and whatnot, I just again remind all over Florida that the communities that currently have landscaping are paying lease fees for that landscaping. And again, that is probably as varied as some of the other fees among communities. And I just want us to remember that as we look at what additional costs the local governments would be asked to pay. We start balancing because it really boils down. It boils down to I certainly can't ask my constituents to accept the impact of the and it's, as this process has gone forward, it's become more and more clear. The concept, the idea of passenger rail is great, but it's the details. And the more the details come out, the more dismaying it is. And so it's just really ask everyone, ask the railroad to work whatever for, whether it's the all over Florida or your infrastructure, the infrastructure division. The way it's going right now, I mean, we see the reaction you're getting, and that's just not, we end up with sort of the idea of the old Robert Railroad, and that's the perception. It's just not going to have anything to do with it.
I think we've been very open with, you've been part of the process, we've come and discussed with you, the bridge operation, so if you guys are going to continue to have that on or you take the input from you, and how we can do it.
I think it's fair we have our financial impact statement to discuss, hope to reflect the positive impacts, as Councilman Davis has mentioned, and the possible negative impacts we've talked about, and then trying to operate in the ambiguity of no definition of sealed corridor. I think that may end up being another large issue of discussion. At the minimum, it has to be a 6-foot chain link fence continuous for the entire stretch.
Well, and thank you, Councilmember, for raising that issue. With respect to trespass prevention, there is not clear guidance with respect to how that is treated along the corridor. We know we have pre-existing issues with respect to trespassing. Particularly, they've been noted in communities like Jupiter, West Palm Beach, and Lake Worth, where you can see the cow paths walking to the point where the tracks cross. The FRA, we had a chance to meet with FRA staff on this very issue during the diagnostic field reviews. The FRA has funding available both to evaluate the extent of illegal trespassing and mitigate illegal trespassing. It has been viewed by some as a double-edged sword because we're not used to seeing a fence along that corridor today, and it would require some type of fencing or barrier, which could be landscape materials. Bougainvillea was suggested as a landscape material that could be planted along the edge to prevent illegal trespassing. That might be visually more appealing than fencing. And so we're in discussion with the FRA on that opportunity. It's been raised as an issue outside of the Oliver Florida project. It's been raised as an issue ongoing. And so we're in dialogue with them to explore how we can avail ourselves of those resources to understand the problem and mitigate it. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
You mentioned that there's been no studies done to quantify the negative impacts on property values. And the environmental impact statements, nor the financial impact statements, address the obvious deterrent factor of residential redevelopment and residential property values along the corridor. How can we move forward without having that fairly substantial piece of data to be considered?
That's why it's raised as an issue, Councilman. We don't know what's in the environmental impact statement yet because it hasn't been published. But this is an issue that's been raised in a number of occasions with the public and local governments. And so the recommendation is to be sure the environmental impact statement addresses that very issue.
So the draft that we have doesn't contain any of this information?
We don't have a draft environmental impact statement.
Okay.
This is a laundry list of everything we've heard in doing all the public outreach we've done. And so the recommendation is to ask the FRA to be sure you address these things before you issue the draft EIS. Here's what we're hearing as a regional planning council in talking to local governments and others through the region. So Federal Railroad Administration, we want you to be sure you address these things. That's the recommendation to council.
I did have 2 more hands, but I want to see if those that are still there realize I'm going to be going around with your ideals. Mr. Weaver, brief, please.
Every time you decide to track the freight train, when it takes the time to get back up to speed, it's going to block our local crossings for an extended period of time. It takes longer.
No, I'm saying we're always sidetracking.
If you need to sidetrack the train, and then
That's why I said that. I don't believe that's true.
well, even if it's not blocking the crossing when it stops, when it recommences, it's starting from 0 miles an hour, all the energy and everything is expended getting back up to speed, so that the freight train crossing is going to take longer. That's one thing. And is my analysis correct in a 200-mile run from Miami to Cocoa that these freight trains could be sidetracked 4 times?
That's not correct. That's where I told them the information of sidetracking freight trains. That's not, in any of the models we have, it doesn't have that happen because with double tracking the corridor, there's no need for that. There are places where there's switching happening. That's a freight thing that's happening today. And that's where that third switching here, like the Riviera Beach is an example.
Even though the trains are on both directions, you're not going to be sidetracking freight trains?
Because you're thinking of volume of trains. We have a model, an RTC model that actually has that. And it has trains moving all the time. It doesn't have trains waiting for other ones. That's what happens a lot of times on the South Florida corridor, and that's because they're not equipped with enough infrastructure. We don't have that issue. I'll be happy to get with you and we can show you how it functions.
We really need
I just don't want to
Last comment I'm here partially because I'm a property rights advocate, but on this one occasion, the like to point out that the municipalities should become familiar with what limitations that FEC has on their bundled property rights. It's kind of an uneven playing field right now, even though there's spirit of cooperation needs to be maintained. Any property rights that FEC has do have limits on them, and when they start impacting your public safety and noise and appearance, there are some limitations the municipalities should be familiar with.
Okay, other comments, Mr. Weaver?
Chairman, I respectfully point out that several members brought up some negative impact concerns that they'd like to see brought forward, as well as the financial impact. I'm certain that will save by more than one person that which would have made it into your list of 6.
Remind me that again. Yeah.
Your abbreviated 6 items that include positive impact analysis.
Right.
But there's been discussion about both positive and negative impacts. And
It's like a topic for you in many senses, and I could realize you're reading from a pre-written speech. I just want to make sure that you realize that this is obviously a very difficult issue for a lot of communities, realizing that we're here to help protect the general health, safety, and welfare of our communities. And with what you're proposing, what you're discussing in many ways, it negatively affects what many of us believe is the quality of life we've been asked to represent. And so I think from that standpoint, I just want to make sure that your comments, I heard them, some of them seemed a little disingenuous. Obviously, it's careful with the words that you're trying to say, but I just want to make sure that you continue to work. I was concerned when I heard from Commissioner Corona that they just found out about the 3 tracks, realized that's going through St. Lucie Village, where the cost for them to put in quiet zones would actually be in excess of the cost of their actual annual budget. So it's a concern realizing that they have 6 crossings in their little village, and then realizing the Tiger grants are being worked in Broward County, which is benefiting from a stop, whereas the communities that don't even get a stop weren't even brought up to speed as it related to the advance of that Tiger grant process, which is one of the funding mechanisms for that. So I just want to make sure that you remain sensitive to those aspects, because there are a lot of things that we're sort of seeing and hearing that bring cause and concern. I do want to let the council members ask you some questions, though I did have a question as it relates to, it seems to be brought up on several cases about you're a private company and that you're not receiving subsidies, you just stated, but I keep hearing comments that you actually have applied for either federal or state funding and that you're pursuing other monies outside of the private sector.
We don't disclose our financing structure, but because we're a private company, and we have applied for a loan. Not a grant, not cheap money, it's a loan. I want to be able to reiterate that because that is the process for that, and that's why it's kept out. It's a confidential process.
15, can we move on?
It's a confidential process, like Tim was saying, for the FRA, because it is a private transaction. It's not free money, it's not something that's disclosed. It's part of a transaction that happens just as anybody else would apply for a loan. We keep those documents confidential. We're a private company that doesn't disclose its financial structure, but it's a combination of debt and equity. That's basically the bottom line for the actual project. It's no grant to operate subsidies.
By the way, there were several other comments that I was trying to jot down during our item. If I could just maybe mention these, see whether or not these would be added. I had the item requesting 45 days for the EIS review clock. Also, we had...
That's part of my motion.
Yes. Included with that, I had a comment for including positive impact analysis. We had a comment about emphasizing better that the FECI is a private entity. We had the item of adding wildlife issues such as the state parks. We had recognizing better impacts related to the rail sidings, as well as the last one was including the positive impact analysis. There were a total of 6 items that came through your comments when we discussed it that we marked except for that 45 days.
Thank you. You told us those directly false what sentence that we have to consider yourself in Arizona will not be supporting this other. All of this I feel to affect the quality of life in 4 years. So disability and surrounding areas.
And really, we're not asking for support of anything. All we're doing is providing comments. This would be taking a group of comments that you're putting on the record to make sure that the federal government protects our areas of interest that we're expressing today so that they don't try and write something without your comments being heard.
But the question is whether those comments actually be heard.
They do, it becomes a part of the federal record on that item.
Yes, sir. I would like to address one major issue, and that's the bridge over the St. Lucie River. Freight train right now, the bridge is down 17 minutes. If you add 2 passenger trains, it's 9 minutes each. And if you should happen to get 2 freight trains, and freight was a key word in your presentation, if you do 2 freight trains, 17 minutes each, that's 34 minutes, and 2 passengers is 18. That bridge could obstruct navigation for up to 52 minutes an hour. That will destroy a minimum of 2 of our marinas, and it will definitely have a huge adverse impact on property values for waterfront homeowners west of the bridge that bought that property to boat and be able to navigate through that bridge.
Appreciate it, Mr. Conlon. Do you have any comments? Just so you know, we're actually working with the marine industry in St. Lucie, and we met with them several times. It's not as simple as you're adding up for the cross. It doesn't work like that. Not every train crosses. Only things that cross twice are the passenger trains, freight trains throughout the 24 hours. So it's not adding, just to pick a number and say I'm going to add that crossing to the hour. It doesn't work that way. But we are actually having a whole model analyzed to it, and we're working on how we can find and make sure that there are plenty of holding time, if you will, for bridge for the marine traffic. We're very respectful of it. We're working on it. I took a boat trip near Iran to show me the areas down at her area to see how the bridge operations would impact the residents. So we are definitely not disengaged. We're very engaged in figuring out that balance between the maritime industry and freight service and the passengers.
My concern, despite that, is the increased freight traffic is only compounding.
No, and that's, and the analysis takes the growth. It's not just what's there today. We're looking at how it grew when it grows, how it's going to be interacting with the actual bridge. So we're very sensitive to what's the maximum going to grow. We're putting it on. It's not there today. It probably won't be there for quite a while. But we're modeling it so that we give the open time sufficient to balance out that bridge. So that's our commitment. We're committed all. There are 3 movable bridges we're committed on 3 different sections to work with the industry. We engage all 3 industry. Tim has been there for a lot of meetings and put a lot of input, and our guys are working on that. And that all gets submitted to the code. So it's not us just saying it. It goes through a process, and that ends up in the record decision as a specific condition. So it's not that we're just trying, it's going to be a requirement to operate the system.
I had Mayor Taylor, and then we'll have Mayor Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you for this information. It's very impressive. But my question is the tracks and the freight movement. Because right now we already have problems with backup on the railroad tracking, especially in certain residential areas. Now, are we going to see this impact in the immediate or, what they're talking about doing in the immediate or long range? Because this could present a potential problem.
So with respect to freight service that's out there today, what we know in working with FDOT on the Coastal Wind Project is that freight service was at its highest kind of around 2007, 2008, when the economy was in a very robust posture. And so freight trains were numbering maybe 18 to 20 freight trains a day. That seems to be the estimate. That volume of freight service reduced as the economy cooled off after 2008, and so freight service was down maybe 12 to 14 trains a day, and the freight service has increased in the past several years. So now there are, I believe, 14 through trains and 4 over trains, 18 trains per day on the corridor. The post-Panamax impacts from the widening of the Panama Canal are projected to occur certainly after the canal is open, and the state has taken aggressive efforts to enable those ports to be able to receive that freight. So the deepening of Port Miami and the improvements to Port Everglades are for Miami is underway, for Everglades is going through the financing process. And those impacts are expected to start to arrive in May 2017, 2018.
I guess what I'm asking is because we have an unusual situation in Riviera Beach, we have the switching of the on the track. So to me, that could present a substantial problem for the residents of that area. I don't know if, Jose, you have addressed that, because to me, that is something that we would certainly need to look into, because you already have a backup morning and afternoon and evening, and if we're going to have these other trains coming every hour up until 9 p.m., we'll never cross. Neither will we ever have emergency vehicles who can get across the track. So to me, that's a big issue.
And there are some improvements that are being made that can help remedy some of that impact. For example, as the council may recall, there was a tire grant awarded last year for 2 rail interconnections to be constructed. One in Northwood, which is 25th Street in West Palm Beach, and that's a connection between the CSX and FTC, and the other is called the Iris connection, and that's down in Miami at the very southern end. And that rail connection is specifically designed to enable some of that inbound freight to get out of the congested downtowns, like between Miami and West Palm, but it would come back in West Palm and go through Riviera. Some of that freight could continue north on the CSX, but there's been no commitment, and that's the subject of the freight rationalization study the state is doing now.
Well, I would hope that anyone who looks at that will grab. Should the Lake Park experience come out as well. So that is something that those communities really would be affected if you do not take a serious look at that.
And certainly be added to the recommendation.
And it needs to be short, in the short run, not long.
Perfect.
That in your favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess earlier this morning when I was preparing to come here, they had on the news about the bridges and actually they were saying that what's the solution, maybe moving something to the west. So all of that is just truly not acceptable, so we really need to look in the box, not outside the box this time. But I have 3 things. And Kim presented it, and this was closing off the tour, which maybe I misunderstood her, but that's the main corridor for West Palm Beach. We have a lot of businesses in that area, so maybe I misunderstood what she said.
Yeah, we've been working with the city of West Palm Beach. There are 2 specific grade crossings. The blocks in West Palm Beach are very short. So our trains and our platform are 1,000 feet long. Right? A short train, but it's 2 very narrow blocks. And so those 2 grade crossings have to be removed. And we are building infrastructure and working with the city of West Palm Beach to build infrastructure that goes around the station. So it's not like dead ends and people on the around. There's actually circulation around the station that will happen. And that's an ongoing thing that we have in the city of West Palm Beach. So you have numerous east-west connectors along downtown West Palm, starting with Granada all the way through down to Fern. So we will have those connectivity, and that's what we're working with the city on to have that. And there's not no other way of putting a station downtown West Palm Beach, because the train is about to be on.
So if I'm understanding, you're not closing off Ventura.
We're rerouting the perimeter road in the city's master plan that we're building.
So you're telling me that West Palm has agreed to have those roads closed?
Well, it's those grade crossings are, again, it's a crossing agreement that we have with them. And so we're removing the grade crossing and rerouting the road around.
Could you just, I'm not a trained person. So are you saying that you're going to a car not cross there?
Right, we'll have to go around the station.
So you don't have to go to Hawk down the road?
So we're referring to the plans.
Okay. So that's the information that should have been brought to the public.
And it is. We've had open discussions with the city of West Palm
business.
And we've met with the downtown development authority, met with businesses in the area, and with city place, and we've worked.
City place is not an issue for that.
Well, there are neighbors that are exactly the
You talked downtown.
Yes. So we've engaged the local community on that.
I guess you didn't count it, because we're in the downtown.
We've actually met with the county and the county administrator, the county engineer, we all know about that.
We didn't come to us.
This is the county mayor.
I understand that it's a city road.
Again, I think the communication just, we've had there clearly have been little discussions here and there. That's why I think it is important. And that's maybe more common to Kim and Michael that just more communication and things coming out so that people are a little bit more aware of some of the.
Okay, and I also brought up about the linear switching, and I'm sure you're probably familiar with that. I don't know if you met before, which you probably have, but that switching area is a problem as it exists today.
And the FDOT has is doing several things that will improve that switching area. Right now, in the hospital nearby, that is why. And so my understanding is a current issue today, right? And so FDOT has met with, it's the freight side of the house, we're already there, has met with them, and they're coming up with infrastructure changes that would help that. So I forget the name of Blue Heron?
Blue Heron.
So I know that there's a plan to either an overpass or a siding that's going to be done so it doesn't block where the switching happens. So FDOT is working on it right now. It's an FDOT-driven effort. I'm just giving you information. FDOT District 4 is the one that's doing that right now, and you may want to inquire with them. It has nothing to do with the passenger side of the house, but FDOT District 4 has a project for that right now.
So your train is not going to go on that track?
It goes on that track, but we don't block it. It's 1,000 feet long. It crosses the intersection less than 45 seconds.
So you cross the 45 seconds?
Man, we're only 1,000 feet long. We don't block it. The freight trains that we're talking about, like those are the long freight trains, the unit trains, those will still exist. And that's the thing we're referencing today. All of the Florida trains are smaller and they cross the intersection much quicker.
Okay, I think Commissioner Knight and perhaps myself need to ask you to come visit with us.
I'll be happy to come visit with you.
So that we can open it to the community.
We've met before, we'll engage again, we'll have some discussion, so.
I want to ask Michael if he would just make a quick comment here so we can help with some of these comments.
Mayor Taylor, this is up to you, the mayor, the board as well. If you'd like to volunteer Kim, come to Kim.
Okay.
Go ahead and work with your staff to do a briefing from the county commission district. Because there's a lot of pieces to it. And, the MPO did part of it, and the cities aren't doing it all.
Commissioner Lewis?
And I was just going to say, I'm not going to make any comments because most of my feelings have been expressed more than adequately this morning. I did want to say that as far as this, as far as the motion recommendation, if we don't go on record, I don't see anything in the staff report, I haven't heard anything here this morning that expressed overwhelming support for this project. I think if we don't go on record with these concerns, you're opting out of your chance. I mean, we sit here this morning listening to residents. We have listened to residents in our county. The question was asked, have we sent documents forward? Yes, we have. There's been a lot of discussion, as was mentioned, at a number of boards at the county level, and at the MPO, and well, ours is the TPO, and at the board, at our board level, on the county commissioners. It's been discussed thoroughly in the county. We've taken those comments, we've taken comments here this morning. If we don't speak up and forward, then by voting no that we don't want these comments to go forward, quite honestly, I feel I was abrogating my responsibility to forward these comments to the appropriate folks. I would just like to mention that the Board of County Commissioners is going to Washington next week. We will be going to Tallahassee as well. It's going to be a really interesting week, folks. We're going to land in Orlando and drive to Tallahassee, just the way the schedule worked out. I think I would like to tell you that this is going to be one of the big things we take forward with us. And once again, none of us have, the process, I think, needs to be stressed here. We are not voting for or against this project. It's not something that has come to that. It's not something that will ever come to that, unfortunately, I think. But if we don't state what we feel, what we have found, what everyone else has reported to us, I think we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. So I will be voting for these recommendations.
All right, I have Mayor Ferrari, I have Commissioner Corona, I have Councilman Becker.
Well, just on that same subject, because when we please include the County Park, what we share, one of the crossings there, and we would like to include in it.
Mayor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Although our community isn't directly affected because we're to the west, I think a good planning exercise that the FEC can do, because they have the data, is you already know how many freight trains you have in the system right now. You already know your projected schedule for the passenger. I think if there was some kind of overlay just shown to especially in these areas where we're going to stack freights and the way what's the plan and who's involved to solve that plan, because it's evident that there are different speeds of trains, there's different lengths of times that crossings are closed, bridges, etc. But I think that schedule, which you should already have for present day, at least was analyzed, because it'll be pretty close when you start this thing. I think that would help all the public understand a lot better to, what are the ramifications? What are the delays that we expected? Do we need to be lobbying for more overpasses in certain areas? Do we want certain streets closed and not others? So I think that's a good thing. My other point was yesterday, due to accidents and backup on 95, I traveled Dixie Highway through Delray Beach all the way down through Boca. I was going to Deerfield Beach actually. And school is out this week in Palm Beach County, and along the FEC track, I saw at least 6 different occasions of kids trespassing, either going to parks that are on one side of the tracks or the other. So I think this whole sealed corridor is a big issue in terms of public safety. I think a lot of time needs to be spent on that, all working together to come up with a design. As an architect, I think we want something, aesthetic in our communities. Even though we don't have rail in our community, I would be very concerned to be seeing what looks like a prison running up and down the rail corridor. And I think it's got to be more than landscaping, because I know in Lake Worth they put landscaping along their sidings, and kids just have to really create paths. So those are just my 2 comments. And I think if we could get some of this out on the table, I know the public would be a little bit more at ease, at least on those particular issues. And then just finally, one other comment. I heard Mr. Gonzalez talk about DOT being involved, but that's a cost that the public is going to bear when it goes to DOT. If they're going to build a flyover or a crossing, that's going to take away from DOT money. In my community, we want it for resurfacing the roads. So, we see all these other proposals for grade crossings through the MPO, and it just takes away from the normal maintenance of roads and at least in our county, we're just carrying across country.
Tim, thank you. This week, Investors Business Daily reported that the National Transportation Trust Fund will be completely exhausted by August of this year. With all of this funding associated with the issues we've been talking about, privately funded, or would any of it be subject to federal funds?
Commissioner, that's a question that I need to do some research on to understand. The FRA staff has been clear that the details related to the RIF fund remain confidential, and so we have limited information with respect to the RIF fund other than it is implemented through the Federal Railroad Administration. But we're not aware of what the source of funding is for those dollars to be done. There are other aspects of the project, like hybrid grants that were mentioned earlier, that I don't know what the relationship is between the Transportation Trust Fund and hybrid grants. So we certainly have more work to do with respect to that question, and so we'll do that and we'll report back to council.
And I know the Northern communities are concerned about that as well, because I believe you all applied for $7.9 or $7.4 million in the fire grant you applied for to Palm Beach County, which I think you have about $6.9 million match or so that you set aside. So Robert would really be on that as well. Okay, did I miss any council members?
Mr. Chair, I think this has been a useful forum. It's full, as part of the purpose of what we were trying to accomplish was to get the input from not only the council members, but also from the public. So it's been extremely useful. I would think we would further the motion so that we might elaborate the number 1, and that we want to incorporate this so it gives us a little bit of time for the different members to send in additional recommendations for the comments to council. So it's just no, you don't like that.
It makes it hard for the staff to do that.
But we've got a lot of things.
All of us had the opportunity, as with our own commissions and councils together, to provide comments. This was really just Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council on the draft of BIS. But thank you for your comments on that. Obviously, the motion makers and second. I have Commissioner Zerby, Commissioner Cronin, and I have Mayor Phelan.
Mr. Chairman. Has the study included any east-west transportation services, linkages to maximize that ridership and access to city and neighborhood destinations? Because, we're working on our own transportation plan, development zones and things like that.
There's no study for us to review yet. The issue has been raised in discussions with local governments and others. FECI is really going to be the entity who can address that because we don't have a document to review yet. So we would hope that it's addressed, but we haven't seen the document. With respect to Charter Oak Coastal Link, there has been active discussion with respect to how additional transit connections can be established east-west. And it is a core focus of the project development study that's underway with respect to Charter Oak Coastal Link. All the transit providers are engaged in that effort. And so to the south, it's Palm Tran, BCT, which is Broward County Transit, and Miami-Dade Transit. They are partners in the study. They participate as part of the study's guidance, and they're actively engaged.
Actually, I have comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman.
Dr. Delaney, let's a couple of quick questions. On the Charter Oak Coastal Link extension, you mentioned that, as we know, it comes to Magnolia Park now, and then you indicated that it would start from Jupiter to Noah. And I was wondering, and I was just elected a year ago, so I need to be updated on some of this. The portion between Magnolia and Jupiter, would that be included in the extension?
It would, Commissioner Wright, if I could just, hold on, went the wrong way. There we go. That little map on the side should be larger to make this point. But nonetheless, this map illustrates the current system concept for the Charter Oak Coastal Link service. And that service is proposed to run from Jupiter south to Miami, initially with about 25 stations, including one in the city of Riviera Beach. And ultimately, that corridor could include more stations. There are many more communities that want stations than are currently identified in the system concept. And there are perhaps 30 or 35 stations that could ultimately be constructed on that corridor. And so this project, which is the Charter Oak Coastal Link project, is the subject of a separate process, a project development process that actually is now just beginning. It's a 2-year evaluation of station locations and necessary infrastructure improvements to allow the commuter rail service to be extended. It will also be required to address the complete financial ramifications and responsibilities to allow that service to carry forward. How would stations be constructed and financed? How would the service be constructed from a capital standpoint? And how the service would be funded for operations and maintenance long term. And so all of those details are packaged in the documents related to the Charter Oak Coastal Link effort that is underway.
Okay, last question. And the Riviera Beach passenger location, you indicated it's in the proposed plan now. When would the final decision be made for us to know if Riviera Beach made that cut?
Pardon me. The project development phase is supposed to begin within this next month or so. Within 2 years, the project development work must be completed for the project to be able to be submitted for federal funding, and that's how it's designed now, to be submitted for a Federal Transit Administration New Start grant, perhaps. Discussions have been underway with the city for the past 5 or 6 years with respect to the station location, land development regulations around the station, and potentially the city's financial responsibility, depending on how the project would be financed. At this point, a station in Riviera is identified in the preliminary documents, and so it continues forward, and it will be the subject of discussion of the Palm Beach MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, as well as the subject for discussion with each of those local governments to determine whether or not the station location is right, how it can be financed, and what additional steps may be necessary to enable it to happen.
Thank you.